Hey everybody, my name is Ted Forbes and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Photography. Today we're going to talk about black and white image conversion. This is a subject that I've hit before on the show, and I'll put links to some of our past shows in the show notes. And I like to do this a little bit differently every time because there's a lot of different ways you can take an image that's color and do your black and white conversion depending on what it is that you're going for. Again, I'll link to some of those shows. Today we're going to talk about a piece of software that is out by the wonderful folks at Nik Software called Silver EFEX. And some of you probably heard of Nik Software before. They basically write programs that applications that work as plugins for Photoshop, Lightroom, Aperture, things like that, that make your life much easier. They're kind of advanced photo editing tools. And the one I'm talking about today is one called Silver EFEX. And there's a couple reasons that I like Silver EFEX. A lot of you that watch this show regularly know that I am a big fan of film. And when I can, I shoot film. My personal work is all done that way. And there's lots of reasons why. One, I think there's a look to it that I just, you can achieve it with software, which is actually what we're talking about today, but it's just easy just to make it that way. I like the fact that when you shoot film and do darkroom stuff, I'm making things with my hands. It feels more tactile. There's more touch involved with it. But truth be known, I do shoot a lot of digital too. Sometimes with clients that I've got now, it's not always possible to shoot film for a variety of reasons. One, they need raw files, or they need there's not enough time to get all the developing done. The project's too big, the deadline's too tight. There are a number of reasons why you would want to use digital, obviously now for professional work. And so a lot of times I will use Silver EFEX in that workflow. The two things that I like about it, the user interface is really nice. It makes it really easy to go in there and quickly get good results and get what it is that you're going for. The other cool thing, you can save presets, kind of looks, if you will, if you've ever used video editing software where you can save looks, and basically you can apply that look to another image and just go in and tweak it, so it gives you a really good starting place. And I think, though, the second thing that I really like the most about Silver EFEX is that it has an amazing grain emulator in it. And I think it's the closest you're going to get to the film look without actually shooting film. And that's what I want to look at a lot today when we do this, emulating different looks of films. So anyway, come on over to the computer, let's have a look, and let's see what Nik EFEX is all about. Okay, so we're going to take a look at Silver EFEX, and I'm running this right now. You can run Silver EFEX as a standalone application, but I actually prefer to use it as a plugin. If you're working with a lot of images and you want to use a program like, in this case, Apple's Aperture, or if you want to use Adobe Lightroom or something like that, you can also run it in Photoshop. I like to be able to combine this with other workflow items, so I really don't run it much as a standalone, but I'm going to show you how to run it as a plugin. Basically, it's the same interface. From Apple's Aperture, if I right-click one of these images, I'm going to say Edit with Plugin. We're going to choose Silver EFEX Pro, and that's going to open up the interface here, and we'll take a look through. You can see that in the center of the image here, or in the center of the interface, it is just basically done, a straight-up black and white conversion of our image, and this is, starting point we're going to work with. If you look over on the left-hand side of the interface, you're going to see there's a lot of thumbnails here, and these are basically preset looks. And so if I click on any one of these, it will dramatically change the image. I can do an overexposed, I can do high contrast. Most of these I've found, if you want to do something quick, these are a good starting point. I've found that presets, or a lot of times these are called looks, these don't really apply to every image just because you can get a variety of exposures, dynamic range in the image, level settings, but they do give you a good starting point, I believe. There's some that are kind of interesting in here too. I can go for a real high key silhouette thing, or high contrast silhouette. Some of the sepias are nice. There's a dark sepia, and there's also a soft sepia. And of course there is funky stuff in here with goofy borders and stuff, if that's your thing and you want to kind of emulate old school process prints and stuff. But anyway, a lot of versatility to it, and you can actually go in and create all these on your own too, but these are just the presets in here that can get you started. We're going to go back and set this to neutral. I just want to do a clean conversion here because I'm going to show you how we can control and manipulate this. On the right-hand side of the interface, and I love how easy this is to use, you have a set of global adjustments, and the three adjustments that they give you sliders for, and you're going to see these a lot in different things that I'm going to show you in a minute. That's Silver EFEX deals with brightness, contrast, and structure. Now, brightness, as you can probably guess, controls how bright or dark your image is when I use that as a slider. If I want to mess with the contrast, we can turn that way up. It becomes high contrast, or low contrast if that comes down. Let's reset this for a minute. And then finally, we have one thing called structure. And structure is really definition of texture and detail. And so you can see if I crank this all the way up, you're going to see a lot of detail in the brick, in the concrete floor this guy's standing on the platform. A lot of detail in the newspaper comes out, wrinkles in the coat. It's almost like extreme HDR effect it's not as extreme as HDR, but that's the kind of thing you're starting to look at, is localized detail. And also, I can take this away. So if I pull the structure down to 0, or excuse me, negative 100, you're going to see it has a very soft look to it. You start losing a lot of that detail. We'll go ahead and reset this. And generally when I start, I will mess with these 3 sliders just to get a basic start of where I am. So we're going to bring the brightness down just a little bit, and maybe bring a little bit of structure in there, but not too much, about 9%. And you can play with the contrast too. I don't like to get stuck with an image that's way too high contrast, so we'll come back and adjust that if needed. We'll leave that around the middle. Now, there's also tonality protection, so if you want to preserve highlights or shadows when you start to go some of these extreme contrast settings, that is possible from here as well. Under this, you have, under selective adjustments, you have, it says add control point. And this is something that's really cool about what Nik has programmed in here, is that these are control points. And this emulates a little bit of if you've ever worked in a darkroom, which is probably one of the reasons I like this application a lot, and you're doing any kind of burning or dodging, or just, attention to points in your composition. Let's add a control point so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you click add control point and then click anywhere in the image where I want to add the control point. Okay, what it does is it gives us 3 more sliders, and they're the same as the global adjustments, with the brightness, which is abbreviated BR, contrast CO, and structure ST. And this top one, if I click and drag this, you can see a circle appears, and this is the area that I'm working with that these local adjustments are going to make. So let's make the circle this big. I can bring the brightness up. It does a great job of softening. It's like putting a spotlight just on that part of the image. Now when I go back to reshape it a little bit, you can see how that's working as far as size goes. So maybe what we want to do is highlight the guy reading the paper and brighten that up a little bit. And so I can come in here, we raise the brightness and bring my structure up a little bit. And it's just only affecting this localized section. Bring your contrast up. Let's bring the brightness down. It's blowing out just a little bit. And there we go. We've got something kind of interesting. Now, if I grab the circle and move this around, you can see it's almost like a little spot. So I can add that adjustment to the newspaper, the guy reading. Looks pretty good. You can also do the inverse of this. That would be kind of like burning a little bit. I can also make something darker if I add another control point. Let's say add control point. Let's put it over, I don't know, down this way or something. We can make this really big, and I'll try and darken this section up a little bit. This may or may not be something we want. So if you need to reduce a highlight, like that beam over here, the support beam is just a little bit too noisy in the composition. It's very bright. We can bring the structure down if detail is getting confusing or something like that. Anyway, so you can start playing with these control points, and that is a huge deal. And you can already see that we have dramatically changed our composition. So if I do split preview or side-by-side preview, you can see that the top is where we started, and now this is what I've changed that to via a few control points and some global adjustments on there. So go back to single view here. And the other thing that's kind of nice too is there's also color filters. And we've talked in other episodes of this show before about how when you use different color filters with black and white film, that it filters what the definition of what becomes black or white is in terms of color. So for instance, if I use a red filter, it's more high contrast, you lose a little bit of exposure, and it also turns reds to whites, and it lightens up the reds. Whereas if I use something like a green filter, it's going to have a different effect on colors. So you can actually emulate in here as well. If I want to use a red filter or an orange filter, something like a blue filter, you can see how it's dramatically changing things. This poster back here in the original image was orange, and notice when I use the blue filter, it popped that over to a black almost. Whereas if I go neutral, it brings it back up. So you can play with the filters as well. 2 other things that are very, very powerful in here that I like a lot is film type, and we're going to skip that one. I'm going to come back to it in a second. Let's talk about the finishing adjustments here real quick. And this controls everything from toning. So if I want to tone this image to maybe a sepia or even a cyanotype, something like that. There's some really pretty, light cyan colors in here. Or I can do custom stuff too. If I want to do split toning between something like a green and a blue, or even an orange. Anyway, there's some very nice presets in here for this. The sepias are really nice. I tend to like the lighter versions of everything because it can become really intense really quickly. So, maybe I choose a sepia on that. And we can go in and I can burn edges. We can do image borders, which I really don't care for, but let's do the vignette. Let's turn this on, and there's a bunch of different vignettes you can choose from. You can do a lens fall off, which is the most standard type, which just basically darkens your edges. Lens fall off 2, which is a little bit more intense, and 3, which gets really intense. And this, I don't know. It's kind of cool, but it's a little too high contrast for my taste, but it is very dramatic. You can also do white frame lens fall off too, where it becomes white on the outside. It kind of gives you a vintage look. And you can do black framing too, which is less circular. It's more box-like. Or you could do a custom one. So we might do, I don't know, maybe we feel like high drama today. We'll do lens fall off 3. I'll come back to this so I can show you have some versatility here. The other thing that's very cool is film types. If I select on this neutral thing here, I get the tick box, and I've got a bunch of different film looks that I can choose from. And having shot on a lot of these films, this is really pretty close. The only thing that I've found that I need to change a lot sometimes is the grain density, because that can change depending on how high resolution your camera is. So if you're shooting with a digital camera that is, shooting up at 22 megapixels, it's just going to have a different, or you have more information than you do have something that's been shot at 6 pixels. So generally, because of the size of the image, I might make the grain a little bigger if that's a look I'm going for. So you can scroll through these and you can see obviously the higher ISO films have more contrast and more grain to them. So it's doing two things when you select a film thing. This is kind of like a look, much like we did over in the preset section. So you're going to notice it does two things. It does film grain, and it also does the tonal curve of the film you're emulating. Now, you'll notice that a lot of these get very high contrast, and this is almost not fair because I've already made this image pretty high contrast. So if you're going for a film look and you want specifically the look of T-Max or something like that, you might want to choose the look first and then do the contrast. There's a lot to play with in here. So I'm going to, let's go back out. We'll just say neutral on this. And the other thing is you can go create your own. So if I select these little drop-down boxes down here, here's grain per pixel, and I can make it soft or hard. You can change the sensitivity, and you can change the levels and curves. So this is all the things that give you different film emulations. But let's just deal with grain. I'm going to go ahead and bump this up a little bit. Let's make it a harder grain and fewer grains per pixel, so it'll be bigger. And you can go up in here. If you look down at the bottom where it says loop and histogram, notice how grainy the image got, and I'm looping over his face. So this is going to give you a better preview because we're looking at this at a much smaller size than you would see it when it's printed. So anyway, something to play with. So anyway, some really cool stuff there. Now, one thing that's really cool is you're not set in stone with anything. If I come back and I'm like, you know what, I think that vignette's too heavy, I can go back in here and we can change it, and it preserves the image. I can take it off completely if I want, if I don't like the sepia. Maybe this is too high contrast at this point, so let's lower the contrast some. And we're starting to get an image that I like to work with here. I want a little more. I kind of like it dramatic now. I'm changing my mind as I go. So anyway, very cool stuff. Now, what happens is when I go ahead and save this, and this is kind of the bummer about this because, things like Aperture Lightroom are dealing with these non-destructive images these days. And so, unfortunately, as it is right now with the Nik Software plugin, you are set in stone. So now I can't go back and fix anything on this. But one thing you can do is let's go back in here again. Let's edit the original Silver EFEX Pro. It'll open it up. And I didn't save my adjustments before, but let's just do a quick little thing here. Let's bump up our structure. Let's say I want to save this as a look or a preset. You can just go over here and say add preset. And it'll say, what do you want to name it? And I'll say my preset. And you can say OK. And it will save it as your preset. So if I go under custom now, I can see my preset. So next time I open an image, I can use that as a starting point. This is very helpful, and one thing you need to remember to do if you're going to do a whole bunch of images that are very similar in nature and you're still working on them in post. But anyway, this is Silver EFEX. Nik Software has done a wonderful job with this. There's more to it. I'm just giving you a brief or general overview. I really love this, and it's the closest thing I've found to actually working with real darkroom and real film and all that. It really does wonders to make your images look good. There's all sorts of things you can do if you know Photoshop really well, but I found even when my Photoshop chops are up and I do know what I'm doing, it still takes a long time. There's a lot of trickery involved. I like this because it's a wonderful interface. It's very simple. It's very intuitive, and it's good stuff. So if you want to check out more, I'll give you a link you can go to. If you go to our website, which is theartofphotography.tv, just go to theartofphotography.tv/Nik, N-I-K, and this will give you some more information on Silver EFEX, and give it a try. I think they have a 15-day free trial on it, so you can download it and try it out. I think you're really going to like it. If you do like to do a lot of black and white like I do, this is a very, very useful tool. Anyway, guys, once again, this has been The Art of Photography, and we'll see you next time.